Also, it's a freeing life. You know, the lifestyle itself of homesteading, you know, it's hard, but it's very freeing. It's going to be your full-time job, by the way, if you do decide to. I mean, even a small one, even a 5-10 acre, it requires a lot of work to do that, and commitment, especially if you have animals. Plants are a little easier because you can leave for a weekend and that plant's going to be just fine.
The animal's not so much.
Not. Yeah, that animal needs care. So you're going to have a community around you maybe that can take care of some stuff if you need to go on a little
co-oping
vacation.
at that point. You're maybe sharing the load of some animals together.
And it is about community.
Welcome back to another episode of Kingdom Heirs, where faith meets business, inspiring the kingdom-minded entrepreneur. Today, I've got the great privilege of having my friend with me, Russell Jungman, who is a commercial farmer here in South Texas for the past 20 years. Today, he's going to be sharing with us some tips on homesteading, talking about some people are running from some things and other people are running to some things. And so we know that homesteading is very popular and growing our own vegetables and food. As a commercial farmer, I'd love to hear his perspective on that. So, Russell, thanks for being on the show today.
Sure.
Happy you're here. He's that's funny. You're a man of many words, and so I appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
So Russell and I met each other back in 2011.
I believe so.
You were I've told many people this. You and your wife are the first family that Megan and I met, and it was at the church we were attending, the Summit Church at the time.
That's right.
And you
wasn't that a marriage?
It was a marriage class.
It was Sunday school, but it was the marriage Sunday school class.
That's right. Yeah. You were getting in trouble and I was getting in trouble.
Bet.
And
we were there 'cause we needed to be.
We did, yeah, we did. You guys had what, three? You had 3 babies at the time?
At the time we did.
We also had 3 babies at the time. And but Russell had said, well, I don't know how long you'll be here, but we'll here to greet you, and if you move out of town, we'll help you. Yeah. We'll help you load up and leave too. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, Corpus Christi is a pass-through town. People just kind of pass on through.
Especially folks from New York.
Yeah, from New York, for sure. That was, we didn't know if we would make it either. We had no idea. South Texas is a whole different place to be. So Russell, you've got 20 years under the belt as a commercial farmer, but you grew up on the farm.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I grew up from day one.
From day one, and so you're.
Day one.
We were talking about how your mom and dad are likely 3rd, 4th generation farmers.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
and
as far back as we can trace.
As far back as you can trace. So it's in your blood.
It's in the blood.
It's in the blood. And so what I think what's great about that is if you would share this just quickly, your story on so you were in high school and you're like, you know what, this is what I want to be. I want to be a farmer the rest of my life. I can't wait just to get in my new tractor and go.
Well, that was no.
That's not your story.
That was not the story.
All right, so tell me about that quickly, because I think a lot of people have their plans. They set their course, especially in high school, because it's all geared about what you want to be when you grow up. What are you going to go set your sights on? And so you set your sights on something very, very different.
Well, ag business was where I wanted to go, and that entails a lot. You know, agriculture in the broad spectrum is a huge field. I mean, it's a lot of different facets to agriculture. As far as being on the farm, growing up on the farm, working on the farm, it was very hard work, and I was helping as I could from the time that I could.
What were you guys primarily farming?
It's always been the same here. It's cotton, grain, sorghum are the 2 staple crops, and corn when we have enough moisture. There's been a few things added in here and there, but just whenever it becomes available. And one is wheat.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of advancements in wheat varieties that work well down here.
Right.
Whereas we used to not have that. So wheat now is something that we can grow. And of course we can do sunflowers whenever they need sunflowers. So, and that's not all the time.
I just saw, to that point, I just saw someone sow a few acres of sunflowers, which is not that many. and they were huge, and now they're just lumped over and.
Sure, they dry down.
So are they going to cut them, and what are they going to do with that?
Most of the time they're grown for oil.
Okay, so
sunflower oil. Yep, that's what we do. They grow the best here for sunflower oil.
Got it.
We have grown confectionery sunflowers before here that are actually, they were taken and bagged and, for sunflower seeds.
For consumption. Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
But most of the time here it's for oil. So
all
there's lots of different crops that we can. Sesame is another one. We can grow sesame pretty good. But there and again, it's not like cotton and grain. Cotton and grain yield us the most.
That's your money crop.
Those are our money crops. And really, it's just cotton. Grain is the secondary. That's what we rotate cotton with.
Someone told me, I think it was you, years ago. If I know anything about farming, it's from you, from all these years of talking to you.
Okay.
That cotton is the highest yielding cash crop, but it also is the most risky crop to sow.
It is.
So it's like rolling the dice, and you don't know exactly if it's going to hit.
You spend a lot of money growing cotton. Cotton is not something you plant and forget. You have to go out there and take care of it all year long. Whereas wheat is a fairly easy. That's kind of a plant and forget. You may spray it once. Most of the times you don't have to. With the newer varieties, sunflowers is the same way. You're probably only going to ever touch it once while it's in its growing stage. Cotton, you go through it constantly.
Another thing that I learned is that you live in an ag area, right? We live in an ag area.
You do.
And so the cotton is also in our money.
Cotton money is made of cotton. Paper money is made 100% from cotton. You can YouTube that. It's a very interesting little video on how it's done, but it's basically they break it down into the cellulose part of it first. But that's why whenever you have a dollar bill that goes through your washing machine, it doesn't come apart.
That's right.
It is actually cotton.
It's wild. It's wild how much, we'll get back on topic here in a minute, but it's wild how much we need. Talk about that. We need cotton as a great example.
Food and fiber. Food and fiber is what holds it all together.
That's what our civilization is really established from.
It is.
Right?
I believe it was Mike Rowe that said all money starts from either farming it or mining it. That's where everything starts at, because then it's assigned a value. Whatever grew from the earth, or whatever you mined from the earth, is then assigned a value, and that's where it all kind of starts from. And then we go and consume it, use it, do whatever we do. But God provided it.
That's right.
It all started there. He provided it all.
It's powerful, and you just got to go out and unearth it.
Sure.
Or use the earth
scratch
to
and
grow
claw
it. Scratch and claw it.
So
to that point, then in high school, you're all right. I'm going to go for ag, business ag.
Right. Because I felt like, well, that's what I know, and that's what we're going to do. So
I'm certain it was ingrained in you.
It was, but it was, growing up on the farm, it was like I began to have some wanderlust.
Yeah. What else is out there?
Yeah. I'm an adventurer by heart. I really am. Growing up in the country, it's what I did when I was little. You just go out and
you wandered.
You wander around and find out what there is out there. And so I had that adventure part to me. It was hard for me to really look forward and say, well, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. This is it. So
right.
I always had that in the back of my mind. It wasn't until I was in college that adventure part of me grew and grew. And then one day I was walking to class. I stopped in the middle of the campus where I was, my class was still
where were you
half a mile away. This was in College Station.
College Station.
Yeah. I just stopped and I looked around and I said, you know what? I don't really belong here. I don't want the same things right now that all of these people want. I really don't fit in here.
Oh my goodness.
This is not.
How many people have this moment?
Yeah, and it is a surreal moment. Like I'm standing there on this corner, and there are people everywhere running around me trying to get to class, wherever they're going, and I'm standing there still, just looking like this is not where I'm supposed to be. So
how do you navigate that, especially with your parents? Are like, whoa, son,
sure,
you're on a track here. What are you doing?
But it's one of those deals. Like I don't want to waste their money. They were funding my college
right.
program, and I didn't want to. I finally just said, I don't want to waste their money anymore doing something that I probably don't want to go off and do yet. So I turned around and I walked back to my truck, which was about a mile away, and got in it, and I drove to Easterwood Airport in College Station, and I just walked into a small FBO that had a flight school, and I took my first flight lesson that day, and that was it for me.
Seriously, you just said, "Hey, put me in a plane, let's go."
Did.
It was $100 to get in, or what?
And they had a free flight, free intro flight, and
I've
it was
done
actually two of us. There was already a guy in there wanting to do it, so the instructor said, well, hey, why don't you just jump in the back, and we'll go take his, and then we'll stop, we'll swap y'all out, and you can go. So when we taxi out in the plane, whenever we go to check the magnetos.
It's a Cessna?
It's a Cessna. It was a Cessna 172, and we go to check the magnetos, which is a check you always do, and they were fouled, and they couldn't get it unfouled. So he said, well, we're going to have to taxi back, and that's pretty much it. Well, then the plane died. And
it's a great sign.
Yeah, and so the instructor,
you're like, I can fix it.
we had to call and get towed back in. And so whenever we got out of the plane, the guy who was doing the first intro flight, he walks off. I mean, he gets in his car and leaves.
I'm done. I'm out.
And so
I ain't getting in a dead plane.
I'm standing around waiting to see if we're going to get another plane, and the instructor leaves, and then he comes back out about 10, 15 minutes later, and he said, oh, you're still here. I said, yeah, no, let's get a plane and
let's
go.
Do it, yeah.
He said, oh, shoot, I thought you were going to leave like the other guy. And I said, no, let's go. Me and him wound up becoming really good friends. But, I stayed and started taking flight lessons there. And then at some point, he said, if you want to do this for real, you need to go to a real, like a big flight school. Like if you're planning on doing this as a career, then you need to go to a bigger flight school. And he had graduated from Flight Safety Academy in Vero Beach, Florida, and so that's where
he sent you off there.
Yeah, he recommended it.
And this is a commercial. This is a commercial school.
Sure, Flight Safety Academy is built and designed to get your ratings. To get all of your ratings there. It incorporates the classroom with the flight training.
Got it.
So you can do everything.
What was your sights? What did you set your sights
on? Yeah, commercial.
Going to be commercial.
I mean, I wanted to do, just whatever I could do to fly and make money. It doesn't, to get paid to go fly was like.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
How many years did it take?
I started in February of 2000. My wife and I got married on January 1st of 2000. I was in school on February, I can't remember the exact date I started, but it was first part of February of 2000. And in 2001, I had acquired all my ratings. I had actually gone on then to get my instructor rating, and Flight Safety kind of had a deal there that if you made it through their hiring process, you could stay and teach there. And they would pay for your last instructor rating. So I said, well, that sounds like a good deal. So I went through the hiring process, which was difficult, very, very difficult. But made it through, got hired on. I was actually taking my last required flight test before standardization started the next week. And we had done the brief. I had gone to pick up the plane from dispatch, and there was a lot of people staring at a TV that was right above the dispatch area. And that's the first time I saw a plane fly into a building. Yeah. So that was on 9/11. I was taking my CFII check ride.
And that was a what size plane was that?
Which one?
The first one. The first one.
Oh, they were all 737s or 757s.
Yeah, the big boys.
Fairly big airplanes. Yeah. And so
I saw the same. I was in Albany, New York, and I saw I turned on the TV, and I saw the second one fly in. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That was live TV, just watching it. It was just.
So
you
needless to say,
you decided.
I didn't take my flight lesson that day.
I was going to say, I think everything.
That was my final test, and I did not. They grounded everything. I did not take the test that day. That set me back. We wound up waiting around, pretty much doing nothing for, I don't know, 5-6 months, something like that, until they had gotten everything squared back away, and then the doors opened back up, and they said, okay, now we can resume flight training. And so then I went to work for flight safety. And in 2004, I had acquired enough hours then to go to the airlines. And it was basically the second I hit that hour minimum, they were coming. And
job offers.
Had job offers. I had 4 job offers, I think, within 2 weeks.
And who'd you go with?
We chose Delta because Delta's junior base was in Dallas, and my wife and I wanted to get back to Texas. Yeah. All the other junior bases were like Chicago or Atlanta or somewhere else.
The hubs.
Yeah. So I said, no, we want to. So we chose Delta just because of the location. Airlines are airlines.
Right.
You know?
Different label on the plane.
Yeah. So it's all about.
Though Southwest would argue with that.
Well, and Southwest is a unique airline, yes, and those are the Cowboys. That's what we always said.
That's it. Cowboys in the sky.
Yeah, but they get the job done.
They do it.
So
did you? So you spent how many years?
I believe.
Did you map out a plan? And were your parents upset about this?
You know, my parents don't fly. They're like, if God wanted us to fly, He'd given us wings. So
I love it.
They don't leave the ground.
Obviously, they would have been I could see them being
my
disappointed.
parents were very, very supportive of anything that I wanted to do that would lead me somewhere success's.
That's good.
So, did they want me to be a pilot? No.
I could imagine that, especially after 9/11, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, that scared all of us.
Sure.
I think a lot of people didn't want to jump on planes after that either.
But they went in and revamped a lot of things and made it a lot safer as far as, what happened on 9/11. They made that very difficult for that
to happen again.
Same scenario to ever happen again. So,
a lot of guys become pilots through the military.
Sure.
I mean, they get their hours through the military.
A lot of them, and then they do a transition. I trained a lot of people coming out of the military to do the civilian transition, so that then they could go. Yeah, but their hours stay.
Right. All the hours
those hours are experience.
Right.
So they keep their hours, and then that goes towards whatever they want to go do. A lot of well, I say a lot. I mean, it's across the board. Guys coming out of the military with flight hours will, they'll go to corporate areas,
private jets.
fly private jets, things like that, or the airlines. The American Airlines is a big hire of ex-military pilots. So
you're in this new career, young family, you're living in Dallas, flying across the country, back and forth, right?
Yes.
At what point did something change? Like you had that
the
moment.
day my daughter was born.
Okay, so you had that moment on the college campus, and you're like, okay, I want to do something different. I want that adventure. I don't necessarily want to jump in the family business right now. And you spend how many years on that track?
From 2000 to 06.
So 6 years.
Yeah.
And you're working for Delta.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it was. Once I had settled in to the routine of it all, that's whenever it kind of dawns on you, like, oh well, I made it here. Now what?
Now what?
Because now every day is kind of the same.
Mundane.
I've seen this airport before. I know I've seen the hotel before.
Right. It's a hard life.
It is.
It's a hard life.
It is. Once the adventure part's
flight
over,
attendants.
Yeah.
Co-pilots. I mean, that's a hard life.
Yeah. It's not easy. But you have to have the love for flying. I mean, that is what draws everyone into it. And at first you're like, I can't believe they pay me to do this. And then after you're in the routine and the rut, it's like, they don't pay me enough to do
There you
this.
go. That's it. Shut that door. Shut the door. Okay, now we get paid. Let's go. All right, now we can go, right?
Yeah.
So after 6 years, your daughter's born.
Right.
And then
when my daughter was born, I knew, I took the FMLA leave. So I had about a month off before she was born because we didn't know exactly when she was coming. So I had scheduled that. And then after she was born, I got to spend every day with her, until I had to go back to work. After I think FMLA, I took the whole 12 weeks or whatever it is.
Yeah. Real bonding.
Yes.
It's bonding.
Absolutely.
That's
There's a whole nother part to that story we won't go into now because we're going to keep it farming. But anyway, but I had to go back to work, and it broke my heart to have to leave, because whenever you're in the airlines, you're not home very much.
Right.
Sometimes I would only be home one night, just long enough to sleep in the week, and then I'd go back out for another week. And so I think it really hit me maybe the third or fourth month whenever I came home, and it was like my daughter doesn't even know me, whereas before she, I could tell even though at a young age.
Oh, yeah. They know your voice. Yeah.
So had to switch that up, started looking for different things to do, not necessarily a different career, but different places to go fly for.
Yeah. Something
that would have me home every night. An opportunity came up. I had actually applied for several different corporate jet jobs and was in the process of going through some of those interviews when this job in Corpus was told to me. It said, hey, there's an opening here in Corpus for Driscoll Children's Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and applied, got that, and it was great because now we're back down at, around family. And
I didn't realize they have a jet. I thought they have helicopters.
No, so Driscoll Children's at that time, and I don't know
what they have now. Yeah,
I kind of know what they have now, but I won't go into any details because I don't know for absolutely sure. But at that time, they had a fleet of twin-engine prop planes that flew. See, Driscoll Children's has or they did at the time. Again, I'm not real sure right now, but they had clinics.
Mm-hmm.
In the border towns.
That's right.
Pretty much all along the border towns. They could
fly people up.
And we wouldn't fly the people. We would fly the specialists, the doctors, down to those clinics. Those clinics were just, had a real basic office staff. And the specialists from Corpus would go down and hold regular office hours.
Wow.
Down on those clinics. So that's what my job was to fly the specialist and the assistant down there. And a lot of times we would take 2 or 3 to the same location. So you'd have a heart specialist, whatever,
How do you get from, again, that's a cool job. How do you get to back to the farm?
So yeah, through several different scenarios and
the farm is just always calling.
Yes,
we need you, son. When are you coming back?
Well,
these fields need you. Like, how does that
how
does that transition?
That was a very hard decision for me to make.
I can imagine that's a life changing.
It was very difficult. It was at a very rough time that, anyway,
yeah.
That decision, then my wife and I made that decision and we just stuck with it.
Nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah. And I mean, it was me going to her and just saying, hey, I don't think this is the, there and again, this is really not the place for me anymore.
Yeah.
And so decided it right there, and it just worked out that my dad was in a position to bring me on, and so I joined my dad's farm at that point.
Wow.
And I actually got a job working at a John Deere store to cover some of the costs, and was working kind of alongside my dad. And then he lost one of his main guy, the guy that worked for him, and so then I came on full time at the farm.
So you got,
there was a small area of transitional time there,
right?
Which gave me some experience in farm parts. That was, I still use that information.
Your tractors and combines.
That's right.
Need a lot of parts.
How that whole system works at John Deere. Like I said, I worked at John Deere, and that was an amazing, eye-opening experience on how parts are logistically moved around from where they're made to how they get to you.
Right.
John Deere does that probably better than most companies in the world.
Wow.
Their logistical department is amazing.
So you make a transition out of corporate life. Really, corporate jet life,
sure.
Right?
Yep.
And you
back to the farm.
You go back to the farm. I think some people. Now I'm going to say this: you live a very adventurous life. I think the stuff that you do.
That was an adventure.
That in itself, but even today, the things that I know you're involved in, things that you do. But to I think a lot of people have to make these type of decisions. And I think outside of having the Lord to help them through all of that and hear his voice and to hear his direction, to know that it's going to be okay, because faith is involved in every one of those transitions.
Absolutely.
Faith. And it's not just your faith, it's your wife's faith too. Together you have to make the decision, because then when you make the decision, you have to walk it out.
Sure.
You got to walk that sucker out. And how do you know you made the right decision?
Well, and so back whenever my daughter had been born, but right before that, I had committed. We had joined a church there in Dallas after we had moved there, and that church it awoke me to some things, and some men there were walking through some things with me. I grew up Lutheran. That was what I grew up. I married a girl who was a Church of Christ, and those two don't exactly mesh very well. So my wife and I, while we were in Florida, had to go out and find our own thing.
That's right.
It took several years, but we finally landed on a church that we really loved, and it was a non-denominational church. We could both get along there just fine. And
isn't it funny how that works? I love that.
And so that was growing at that time. That seed had been planted in our marriage and that was working its way out. Now we had a lot of things that we brought into our marriage that needed to be worked out.
That's right.
And
like all couples.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so when we moved then to Dallas, we found a church that we really liked there. Became great friends with some of the guys there. And anyway, along that journey, one of them had said, "Hey, what about being baptized?" And I said, "Well, I've been baptized. I was baptized
as a baby."
As a baby.
That's right.
And he said, "Well, have you ever considered, being baptized as an adult?"
Yeah. Well.
And I said, "No, I've never really thought about it." And so I
Do I need to think about it?
Should I into that, and I was like, you know what? Yeah,
why not?
If it's my decision, then I want to make a conscious decision to do it.
That's a good word. Yeah.
So I did. I was baptized, and after that, it was like a wellspring began to boil over, and I really started getting into the Word. I had, right after my daughter was born, I had committed to reading the Bible all the way through, from start to finish, and I had committed to not missing one word. And of course, my Bible that had been given to me was an NIV.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
Not a hard read.
No,
it's not King James.
No,
or nothing.
It's an easy read. Yeah, NIV is a good read. Yeah.
So I committed to that, and while I was going through that journey, it took me about a year. But while I was going through that journey is when all this stuff began to change. All of my wants became different.
Isn't that wild?
It is. Very strange.
It really, just reading a book.
Sure.
But that's the whole point about it's a living word, right?
That's right.
It's the eternal word. The word of God is alive.
And so by the time I was done with that, I was a farmer.
Isn't that wild, dude?
When I started that project, I was a pilot. And when I ended that project, I was a farmer.
Were you happier? Were you in a place of...
Yes.
I know happy is like a temporal word, but
absolutely.
Were you in a different place, better place?
Oh, much.
Because there's peace that comes with...
There was a great peace. Being a pilot, number one, is a very stressful job, and I could feel it wearing on me physically.
Right.
It wasn't something that was not doable. It's just I'm kind of a high stress guy anyway, and so when all that came about, by the time I was a farmer at the end of that read, there was a great peace. I found a great peace and settled into that life. We had 2 more kids right away. It seems like as soon as so we wound up with 3 kids just back to back to back.
I love it.
So, and we were. Yeah, I had settled into farming, but it didn't seem like a grind. Every day was an adventure, So
well, it is.
It went by so fast, and I honestly, I look back and it went by too fast.
Yeah, it's a decade. That's 20 years.
Farming is hard work, so it I blinked and it was 2 years gone by.
I could believe that.
So
to your point of, reading through the scriptures and God kind of gives us a different perspective on life, and the things that are so heavy and burdensome on our shoulders, he starts to give us more direction and clarity. And it's like,
right.
I'll be okay if I do this. Mm-hmm. And you and I were talking about before we got started today that farming is probably the number one topic that's used to explain the kingdom of God.
Sure.
It's like the one industry that is explained throughout the most. Then
Right.
building is probably the second one.
They use a lot of farming analogies in the Bible, and a lot of building analogies in the Bible, just because most people knew those things.
They knew those things, and so that kind of brings
they could
us up-
relate.
So that brings me to homesteading. You and I were talking about earlier is that people are either right now homesteading is very, very popular.
Yes.
And you made a good point. You said, well, look, people are either running from something or they're running to something.
Right.
And right now, it seems like there's a sense of people realize that the systems that's in place, especially post-COVID,
Sure.
systems that are in place are not fully sustainable. I mean, you know more than I know on the shortage of food, the food shortages that exist.
Sure.
If farming literally stopped today, we'd have nothing that we needed.
You got about 90 days.
It's only 3 months ahead of us, 90
Sure.
days, right? So what is your opinion, your perspective on homesteading? And definition of homesteading would be?
What is yours, and I'll tell you mine.
Okay, so I would say homesteading would be sustainable living. So if you could get your own water source, a well, that would be great. If you could have your ability to grow your own vegetables and grow your own proteins, that would also be great. So your own meats. It could be eggs.
Sure.
It could be chickens. It could, chicken eggs. It could be
Right.
chicken meat. It could be cow meat, goat meat, sheep meat.
Right.
Something that you could then maybe supplement that with a trip to the grocery store.
Sure.
But if you could get to that point where you are starting to live off of the land again, like our great ancestors did for
Sure.
thousands of years before us,
Right.
right? Versus just relying solely on commercial, H-E-B and Walmart.
Yeah.
So what's your thought? What's your definition? What's your thought?
So first, I'm going to go through because that's a beautiful dream.
It's a
lot
dream.
of people
I know
have
it's-
that
I
dream.
know
I'm
it's a
asked
dream.
about it all the time. That's a wonderful dream. And if you can make that come to reality, that's a great thing, I think. So before I go into all the awesomeness of it, I'm gonna say a couple things about some of the major, I guess, down points to it.
Yeah,
first.
because you also have a garden at your house, which is
Sure.
which is huge
Well, and we haven't kept it up in the last couple years
because
but
it takes a lot of work.
it takes a lot of work and a lot of time.
There you go.
A lot of time. So first, let's go back to this. You're talking about vegetables and meats, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to leave the vegetable part out of it for right now. Well, let's go to the meat part, milk or actual meat. So if you go to a cemetery right now, just take a walk through a cemetery, one that's, let's say, at least 150 years old. Let's say one that's been around for a little while. Walk through that cemetery and go back to about 1940. Get back into that line where the tombstones read 1935.
End date.
And where
End date.
End date.
Yeah.
Yes.
Started in the 1800s.
And where the end dates are about 1950 something, 1960 something. Go to before that 40 line and count the child deaths
Oh yeah.
in there, and then go to after that line and count the child deaths. You're going to see a drastic change, and that's U.S. agriculture. That's the corporate side to U.S. agriculture. The way food was processed and handled before that time was mainly small farms. That was your homesteads, right? A lot of the food came right out of the homesteaders and was sold at a market.
Right.
Meats,
Farmers market, basically.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and even the bigger supermarkets were drawing off of these smaller farms. The way that food was handled at that time was, that's whenever they figured out, hey, we got to handle this different. We got to have a standard of what clean is and what clean isn't. If you take milk, for instance, milk is probably the easiest one to see it in because a lot of child deaths were from tainted milk. If you go out and milk a cow by hand, you got a bucket, and you're going to put that bucket under there, and you're going to milk a cow. That cow has been standing in not so clean areas. It doesn't matter how clean you got it. it's not that clean in there. And if that were to get in the milk, it becomes tainted.
Correct.
If you go visit a
because we talk about unpasteurized,
right,
and raw milk,
raw milk, which was a kick here about 3 years ago. It's still around,
but still there has to be some safety procedures to that.
If you're going to drink raw milk, then the safety standard needs to be higher.
Correct.
How that milk was obtained and how it was stored needs to be very, very carefully, as opposed to if you go to a dairy, a big commercial dairy, which I've visited a few and they're amazing to watch. But that milk comes from that dairy and goes to a milk processor, which I've visited a few of those. And they test every single load coming in. There's a lab. That's the very first thing that you see whenever you walk into a big milk processing plant is a lab. And those tests are made right there immediately. And one of the ones that I visited, the gentleman that was facilitating the tour said 1 in every 3 loads of milk coming into that processing plant test positive for listeria. And listeria is a pretty bad one, amongst other things that can be in there. But
do they got to throw it all away at that point?
No,
they got to boil it out
because the processing
pasteurization can kill it.
Yeah, that kills it. So it kills everything in there.
But doesn't it also kill the good stuff too?
There's some probiotics and things of that nature, sure.
Or do they add stuff back in? I'm just
your
curious.
vitamins are not. Your vitamins are vitamins, right? And
right.
that's what you're really trying to get out of milk. Now, if you're trying to do milk culture and things like that,
do you think we were really
probiotics?
Do you think we were really supposed to be drinking cow's milk? Do you think God designed for us to drink cow's milk?
That's a good question. Because I've never really explored that.
I don't really know that we were supposed to be drinking cow's milk.
It's a great substitute, I think.
Right.
It's probably the closest thing.
Right.
But
I'm just saying,
if you read in the Bible, it talks about they would cook in it.
Mm-hmm.
They would cook meats in it. They would make things out of milk. So
sure,
it was always an ingredient.
That makes sense. Okay.
So
I was just curious. I just want to throw that
out. I don't know.
There.
That's where I always revert back to is the Bible and what did they do there?
That's good. That's a good way to look at it. I know that raw milk or pet milk, for consumption is illegal in many states.
Sure.
Especially in the Northeast.
Yep.
You get caught with that, they'll put you in jail. They'll shut down your farm. It's legit. It's not fit for human consumption, is what the labels say. It's pet milk. Humans drink it. I've drank it.
It's one of those.
I'm not against it. I'm just saying, this is part of the things that you deal with when you get outside of government regulations.
Some of those things that are in that, if left unchecked, can be compounding. It'll cause other things.
Correct.
So you don't. That's why they're so strict on that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, but honestly, it boils down to safety.
Of course,
it's safety for human consumption. So
right.
Yeah, once you start a disease rolling, it's hard to get it stopped. So they just keep it from ever starting.
Makes sense. So there's milk consumption. There's that part.
Sure. And the meats, the way you handle meat, the way meat is processed, again, has to be done very specifically.
So if you are going to raise cattle,
sure,
you should probably send them off to a processor.
Either that or just have a plan to do yours very, very well.
Makes sense.
Make sure everything is clean. Make sure it's sterilized, before you go into it. It's not going to be clean when you come out, but at least it was clean going in.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Make sure it's cooked, things like that. So those are some of the downfalls to homesteading. If you're not careful, it can cause you some problems.
Sickness, disease. Yeah.
Disease.
Food poisoning.
Food poisoning is a very real thing. It's very real if you're a homesteader. Especially homesteaders that are raising young children. Because children are very susceptible to some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we have,
guts that are a little more established.
We're a little more established. Children are susceptible to some of that stuff. So those are the bad things. The good things, all right? Yes, fresh vegetables out of the garden are the best for you, right? And nobody denies that.
Nobody argue that,
yeah. In commercial farming, things are stored. They have to be. You're talking about logistically moving
food product around.
Food from one place to the other. They're stored. They're preserved. So a certain amount of preservatives has to be applied at that point to keep them from rotting.
Right.
While they're in transit. So on the farm you don't have that. right? You're growing your food, no preservatives. I'm one that I don't think preservatives are very good for you, but that's the lesser of two evils at that point. You know, would you rather have food poisoning or consume some preservatives?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, aren't a form of preservatives kind of like embalming our bodies at some point?
Sure. What they use, you know, if you go back to even biblical times, I mean, salt is one of the best preservatives there is. So what we use now, I'm not real sure. I don't dig that far into the weeds of it. I know that the more preservatives, probably not the best. So
they talk
I
about
stay away from
when you go grocery shopping, they say shop the perimeter, don't shop the aisles. I mean that's how you know you're getting fresh, and it's not packed with preservatives.
Right. So you have that benefit of it. Also, it's a freeing life. You know, the lifestyle itself of homesteading, you know, is it's hard, but it's very freeing. You know, it's going to be your full-time job, by the way, if you do decide to, and that's what I tell people that ask about it. I'm like, that is your job at that point.
Yeah.
So
it'd be good for a couple if a couple, one of them's working outside the home, the other one is working the home. They're working the
farm.
You're working the farm.
I mean, even a small one, even a 5-10 acre, it requires a lot of work to do that, and commitment, especially if you have animals. Plants are a little easier because you can leave for a weekend and that plant's going to be just fine.
The animal's not so much.
Yeah, that animal needs care. So you're going to have a community around you maybe that can take care of some stuff if you need to go on a little
co-oping
vacation.
At that point. You're maybe sharing the load of some animals together.
And it is about community. I mean,
well, that's why you're doing it. It's for first for your own,
and
then your friend circle and your community circle.
That's right.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. And I'm just that aspect alone, where you're relying on your neighbors to help you out at that point. If you're all out in an area where everyone's kind of doing that part of it, then you're relying on each other, and that truly is the body of Christ, right?
Now you're communing together.
Sure.
You're sharing the load together.
Yep. You're working together, and that's a huge thing.
I think that's one of the best things we could do is, that's why our work environment should be a relatively healthy environment, because the people we're working with are those who we spend the most amount of time with.
Right. And in God's plan, that's why you're there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, doing a job, any job, that only benefits the world and the things in it. God has no mind for that. It's about you. It's about everyone around you.
Drawing people in.
Yeah.
I mean, I had, just to that point, I was working on a job site, and we had some topsoil delivered, and the delivery guy showed up, and he's like, "Hey, where do you want this dropped?" I said, "Well, I'm going to put it over here." Da, da, da. He goes, "Well, I'll just follow you." I said, "Well, good. Just follow me up to heaven." So I'm going to heaven. And he's like, I get really like, well, let's just go to heaven together then. Just follow me. I'm going to heaven, right? And I just said that, right? And the driver, he looked at me. He's a big guy. He looked at me. He's like, he just gave me a little like,
Yeah.
And because he was thinking about it.
Sure.
And then sure enough, like a minute later, I turned back around. He says, hey, come here. I said, yes, sir. He goes, I really appreciate that you said that. I'm like, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, it's been a long time since I've gone inside one of those, because I was working at this church build we're doing.
Sure.
Long time I've gone inside one of those buildings. I said, oh, you mean a church? He goes, yeah, when I was young. He goes, I was mistreated, and ever since I haven't really been able to go inside. And I said, well, it just opened up this great opportunity for us to talk about forgiveness.
Sure.
Forgiving those that have offended us and hurt us in the past, and not let what took place to us as a child inhibit us as an adult. Because now we're men. Now we're husbands. We're fathers. We're grandfathers. Like we can't let our past control us. And I said, and God didn't do that to us. That was a man who did that. So I said, so really what you need to do is forgive God, so that you can be close to the fold again.
Right.
Because that's why Jesus talked about leaving the 99 to go after the one. And I said, and here we are right now.
Which is a farming analogy.
Yes, it is. Right? And I'm like, here we are. I said, maybe you're the one right now.
Maybe.
And maybe he's calling you home to say that, come on back. That was in the middle of me running a huge job site. We have multiple vendors coming and going.
Right.
And I just said, look, he's like, I'll follow you. Just let me know where you want to go and I'll follow you. And I said, well, let's go to heaven because I'm going to heaven. I'm on my way to the kingdom of God. Because my brain is, I'm working, but I want to be tied into the Holy Spirit.
Right. As much as you can, keep bringing it back to that.
Everything has to circle back to the kingdom of God. Jesus, he preached the good news. He preached the good news, which was him coming. God loved us so much, he sent his son. He taught people about the kingdom of God. He taught them all the time about how the kingdom works. This is kingdom thinking. And he prayed for the sick that they might recover.
Sure.
Those are three things he did, right? So if I can incorporate those three things into my workday, I'm living purposefully.
Right.
I'm living on
Absolutely.
purpose.
Yep.
And just to take that moment with that gentleman, he was just like, thank you so much. I needed to hear this today. This is where I'm at, you know?
It's so many people out there have that exact same story to them. I just got back from a journey to Damascus, my first one. And I was absolutely amazed at how many people in that room all had basically the same story.
Yeah.
And there was a hurt somewhere along the way that drove them away.
There's always a hurt.
And there was never anybody that came along like what you did that said, hey, it's not your fault. It's not God's fault. You know, so come home.
Get right. Come on. Forgive God. You know? So many people have anger towards God, unforgiveness towards God, because they see God as the one who can control all things. And so surely he allowed that bad thing to happen to me, so he's bad.
Right. That's the analogy that is, that's the connection.
It's so twisted.
Sure.
No, he's a God of love, compassion, mercy. Well, why do bad things happen?
Right.
Because we have an adversary. And the people have free will. They will decide to do what they want to do to one another. And it's never really good.
And your will can be swayed by that adversary.
Right.
And that's how he works the best.
That's exactly right. And once that offense takes place, immediately he plants the seed. It was God.
It was God's fault.
It was the Creator who did that. So then we get angry at God. And that's why I said to him, look, forgive the man who offended you. Forgive God. Ask God for forgiveness. Or say, God, I forgive you. Just talk that. Say, God, I forgive you. Even though
it's not God's fault.
But we still have to. Still have to voice that out, right?
Sure. It's for your healing.
It's for our healing.
That's right.
Right. And at that point, the Bible says that when we forgive those who offend us, God will forgive us.
Right.
For offending Him. Isn't it wild?
It's right there in the Lord's Prayer, too.
It is so like it's a law, like law of gravity.
It is.
It's just an established law that, and then we feel free.
That's right.
So then we feel closer to the kingdom of God. We feel closer to God at that point. And being around people who are kingdom-minded, we are supposed to be the salt of the earth and to draw people closer to the Creator.
So, and so you bring up salt of the earth. What does that mean? As we just talked about, you're the preservative.
That's exactly right.
You're preserving God's kingdom on this earth.
That's right.
Salt of the earth.
And it's the enhancement.
That's right.
And it enhances people's lives because absence of goodness. People say, oh, what is hell? Hell is the absence of God's presence.
That's right.
It's the absolute removal of anything that is good. And so, hell. No. It's literally the absence of anything that is good.
It's a place of punishment by nature, not
because he wants to bring torment on people. Right. It's because there's nothing good there anymore.
Because the lack of good is
punishment.
Torment.
Yeah,
it is.
Right. And so when you've got people like ourselves who have a kingdom mind, have a heart for the kingdom of God, just like Christ taught us to, when we can bring that into every environment that we're in, you work with a ton of people that you employ. There is opportunity right there, and all the people you interact with right there, that people are expecting me, because they know who we are. They know that we're Christians. They know that we have a heart for God. And if we don't bring that, they're like, is he really?
Right.
If we don't bring that encouraging word, if we don't bring that, hey, this is a horrible thing that just took place. I just experienced something horrible, or I know you experienced something horrible, but this is how God's going to bring us through it. If they don't hear that from us, what are we? We're not the salt of the earth.
That's right.
We're not preserving the kingdom of God, and we're not bringing enhancement.
Yep, and that's a daily thing, and it's a daily struggle.
Right.
You know, you have to constantly keep your mind on that.
It's intentional.
At work.
Yeah, not at
Because
home, not just at home.
Not just at home.
Yeah, it's
You
not just in the car
turn
either.
it on, turn it off, because you wind up not turning it on ever. if that's how it is, you know.
We singe
you got
our
to turn it on
conscience.
and leave it on.
We singe our conscience at that point.
That's right.
You know, in our work is, with Kingdom Heirs, we talk a lot about our work, we talk a lot about our companies, our businesses. We talk with a lot of leaders, and the biggest thing is, how do we not compartmentalize our lives? Well, that's my family.
Right.
That's my work. Well, that's my church. And that's the thing that I know I shouldn't be doing.
Right.
Well, no, come on. How do we live life without these walls and these boxes? Nobody wants to live in a box, right?
Sure.
But we box ourselves all the time. And we wonder why our work is suffering, our family's suffering. But this part's doing really well because you keep watering that part.
Right.
You're cultivating that part.
Absolutely.
You know?
No. Great farming analogy there as well.
Yeah, you're right. We all should be farmers.
Cultivating is a huge part. You know, we talked about cotton, how it's something that you always have, and that's a huge deal with cotton, is cultivating, keeping the weeds out of it. And we use different methods for that as well. But if you don't cultivate, it will never reach its full potential. So it's the same way in your life. You know, whatever you cultivate will reach a higher potential than what you don't cultivate. So, and that is the struggle, right? I mean, balancing that. Where am I cultivating? Where am I not? You know, balancing all of that out, and then having to make a conscious effort to take care of the things that you're not taking care of.
You made a good comment to me the other day at your daughter's graduation that stuck with me. And you said something. I said, "Man, you're a great provider." I said, "Look at you, look at your family, surrounded by your family." And you made a comment that struck home with me, that I think strikes home with the majority of men. But there's areas that I'm not.
That's right.
And that is so huge, because we can coast in, as most men do. I bring home the check. I bring home the bacon. I make this possible.
And that is, I don't know where we learned that from, but we're told that's all you got to do.
The all and be all is, I brought home the bacon.
That's
I brought
it.
home the money, so
That's
y'all
it.
can do what you want to do now. It's like, that is so disconnected. It's a viewpoint of, I can coast in my family life.
Sure. I was told that same thing, and I believed it for a very long time. But that is not the truth.
It's not true.
No.
And I think to have a healthy family, to have a healthy work life, community life, we have to be very intentional about providing in all the areas that we as men are called to be. A provider is one.
Sure.
Nurturer is two.
Being present is another.
Just being
You know,
there.
Just being present.
Right?
You know,
I
a
think
lot of
that-
times we're not. And that, I've had to struggle with that, because farming takes a lot of time.
Sure does.
And so I'm out there all the time. But
you also incorporate your children in with what you do.
I do. I'm
Your boys have been
I've
driving
made it a
combines since
point-
they were, what, 5?
yeah.
I mean, dude, they love being with daddy on the farm. I see it.
They do, until it's time for them to
really
go,
work.
go to work
Yeah.
on the farm. And
Well,
then,
that's normal.
Then
That's- Well, that's a
Typical
switch in
teenager.
themselves. Yeah.
Typical teenager. But no, I make a conscious effort to never deny them coming with me.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's some dangerous stuff, and I just simply can't. But
Right.
But when my wife calls and says, "Hey, you know, this one wants to go with you,"
Come on.
okay,
Let's do it.
jump in the truck. We're going. Some days you may just sit in the truck, but when we're going to drive around and we're going to take care of problems. But we're together. You know what I mean? And
And they'll never forget that.
That's right.
Even if they didn't like it,
Yeah.
they'll remember it, that at least
Yeah,
they were
even if
together.
It was boring that day.
You were together.
We were together, and that's a huge thing. You gotta, you know, if you have that opportunity.
Yeah.
If not, you have to just make up for it somewhere. But always keep that in the mind. So that's cultivating. You got to cultivate your relationships, your home life. It has to be attended to.
It must be.
So,
Otherwise, it falls apart.
I mean,
And then we blame God for letting it fall apart.
well, and even when the world was perfect in the garden, that they still had the job tending the garden.
That's right.
So that was before the fall. There was a job.
That's exactly right.
So that in and of itself tells me that that's God's original will, was for you to do something here. And there's never a point where you should just say, well, we're done, I'm retired, and I can sit down and do nothing. That was never God's intent.
I agree with you.
So.
I think there's a number of things that those who have put their time in, I talk to a lot of these guys, like, I put my time in. Well, it sounds like you should have and now that you've got a retirement, I'm happy you've got that. The system allowed you to pour in, and now it's going to pay you back something. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
But don't take all that knowledge that you have and all that experience that you have and let it die with you.
Sure.
That is something that should be generational. That you pass it down. And you say, well, I don't have any kids, or my kids are grown, or they want to talk to me. You find some people that want
others. Yeah.
There's other people that want that knowledge, that
Sure.
experience that you can share and pass down to others. And that is very rewarding.
Sure.
And so, to your
that
point,
in and of itself will gain you more knowledge and experience.
That's exactly
that
right.
You can then pass down to others.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's how we've learned everything.
Sure.
It was our experience of what we learned working with other people,
Right.
and what they shared with us.
You can only read so much in a book. And honestly, farming, you can't learn to farm from a book.
No, you can't.
can learn some very great and interesting principles, but just basic science of things, how it works. But you can't learn it from a book.
Can't you learn it from a YouTube video?
That I don't know.
You can watch a video on farming. I've watched a lot of farming video. I'm like, oh, this is cool.
I know there's a lot of YouTube influencers,
but
farming
until you do it,
sure.
Until you get your hands dirty, and you realize what it's going to take. There's a disconnection.
Sure.
For that.
Even when you do it every day, I know where to put the seed, right? I know when to put the seed there.
Right.
I don't know how that seed
is going to do.
Yeah.
You have an idea. It should do well.
But
this might happen.
I can't make it grow. That's not my job.
I would say it's a supernatural experience. It is.
It is, absolutely. And for how many years haven't I done it? And I'm still amazed that it happens all the time.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
I plant the seed. I do it at the right time. God takes care of the next part.
They say that there aren't any farmers that are faithless.
There's no atheist on a turn row. That's the saying.
Is it?
And honestly, there's all different denominations of people farming.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing, by the way. I like that mix out there. We don't all go to the same church. In fact, I don't think another farmer goes to the church I go to.
Right.
Not a commercial farmer. But you can't, maybe you can if you're blind or something, but you can't see this and not know. And
God's
not know
existence,
there's a God.
The Creator,
yeah,
mapped it all out for us.
Yeah. And there's some times where you're overwhelmed with it. Honestly, I still do. I still get overwhelmed by it sometimes. Just in the cool of the evening is a great time whenever your work is almost done for the day and the birds are coming out and everything's kind of doing its thing, and it's the wind has stopped howling and everything's calmed down and it's quiet, and you hear the sounds of the plants and the animals and things like that. That's a reward unto itself. It is. You really get to see what God's done. You know what I mean?
I think it's really powerful to look at. I have a very similar experience just from a building construction standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Is at the end of the day, I'll sit back and I'll look at what we all accomplished, and I see it as taking the raw materials of the earth, forming them into construction materials that we then erect and build together with a team of people, skilled, and you need their intellect, you need their muscle, you need their knowledge, you need engineering, you need all of this to come together. And it's a culmination of what God has put in the heart of man to build and create, but he also gave us the materials to do it with.
Yeah.
It's so powerful.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, wow, look what we did. Yeah. But not devoid of the Lord, not devoid of the Creator. It's like, no, wow, look what we did with what he gave us to work with.
Right. And with him being right there, it's, we're we're iterations. We're an iteration of the Lord, meaning everything that's in him is in us.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So his desire to build and create was passed to us.
That's I love
That's
that.
where our root comes from, to build, create, to grow something, to do all that. That's from him.
Yeah,
You know, that
it's so
directly came
powerful.
from him.
Yeah, it is so powerful.
So when you participate in that, you're near.
You're close to the Lord. You're close to him.
You're closer than you were, you know.
Yeah,
So.
it's so to wrap that up, you know, for anyone that just wants to even just, I think those who do garden already feel that connection, even just a garden.
That's probably why they're drawn to it, honestly.
Yeah.
They're running to that.
Yeah.
And like we said, we talked about running to something, running from something. Some people are running
In fear.
out of fear. But, you know, the homestead movement, I guess, going back to that, started out with people running to something. They were running back to it. It's that
the simpler
feeling
life,
of
the
being,
closeness to the,
and being near to the Lord.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's powerful.
it is.
Russell, thanks for being on today.
You bet.
I know
Thanks
that
for having me on.
I know you literally are in the middle of, I don't know how many thousands of acres trying to
We,
pull in the crop right now.
We are harvesting.
Yeah.
Right
So
now,
to get Russell here on a harvest day, pretty powerful. So I'm grateful. That was an act of God. So thank you for being here. Would you come back on and
Sure.
in the future, and we can cover some topics that I think
We can get a little more down in the weeds on some of this.
that'd be good.
And,
I think people will appreciate the connection point of how really they can connect God's word back to the earth.
Sure.
And how we can work the earth together and be close to the Lord. I think it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
hey guys, if you liked what you heard, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Share this with your friends as well. We also have our merch, so you can check us out on our Shopify account. Thank you guys for being with us. We love you all. We'll see you next time. God bless you.